just when you thought this show couldn't get any weirder, any more mysterious, any crazier, it just did. Because episode 4 of WandaVision, just wow. There was a lot of hype around this episode because there's been a lot of teases from the cast and the directors of like, oh, there's going to be this big shift in episode 4 and a lot is going to be revealed. And it was. Like, this episode was crazy. Probably one of the biggest parts of it, though, that made it so different and crazy, was that Wanda and Vision were barely in it, which, of course, was sad to see because I love those characters. But at the same time, we got some awesome parts with Monica, with Jimmy Woo, with Darcy. I loved seeing Darcy back. She's awesome. And who would have ever thought that Jimmy Woo and Darcy would have been such a great team up, such a great dynamic duo? But I loved it. That was awesome. Like, that was just so cool. And even though it wasn't really like dealing with WandaVision, and the episode was all about S.W.O.R.D. and kind of explaining what's been going on behind the scenes during these first 3 episodes, I think this was probably like my favorite episode of WandaVision so far. And honestly, we're probably going to be saying that every week, like, oh, every new episode is our favorite episode, because it just keeps getting better and better as it goes. And this show was just insane. And there were some crazy moments in this episode that a lot of this stuff we saw coming, a lot of the stuff we theorized about with S.W.O.R.D's involvement, but then there's also some other stuff in here, some little tiny hints and nods that were really cool as well. And like I said, this was just so cool to see S.W.O.R.D's perspective of it. And of course, it was a little disappointing that we didn't get a cool theme song or a commercial or anything, but this was just such a great episode. I just love this. So enough rambling on about all how much I love this episode. Let's go ahead and jump into breaking this thing down. Because this episode starts off with Monica. We get some backstory with her. Some very, very interesting backstory. Because we start off during the blip. That's right, the blip. We're going back to what was first introduced in Spider-Man Far From Home, with everybody coming back after the snap, and Monica was apparently snapped. So now she has been undusted within the blip, and she wakes up in a hospital, and then she goes looking for her mom and everything. And then we find out from the doctor that her mom, aka Maria Rambeau, who we saw in the Captain Marvel movie, she died. So she passed away 3 years ago. And, you know, makes sense. She was old and everything. Also, she had cancer. So that's sad. But then we also learned that she was, like, one of the people in charge of S.W.O.R.D. And then speaking of S.W.O.R.D., S.W.O.R.D. has been here the whole time. Because we find out here, like I said, Maria died 3 years ago. And it was 5 years ago at this time when Monica and everybody else was snapped away. So Monica already knew about S.W.O.R.D. So S.W.O.R.D. existed before Avengers Infinity War even took place. And somehow we didn't even know about it. Like, that's just crazy to think about. Especially since it looks like, you know, it's a big public building. So how would nobody notice about it? So it was crazy. But then Monica is trying to get back to her normal life. We see her go back to the S.W.O.R.D. headquarters. And We find out a little bit about S.W.O.R.D. here. Turns out they focus on AI and nanotech. Nanotech, like what Iron Man's armor was made out of in Infinity War and Endgame, so that's cool. And then also, of course, sentient weapons. And that's been teased over the past couple weeks about S.W.O.R.D. in this series. And They said that they've stopped with space stuff for now, but I assume that now, after the blip, now that everybody is back, they'll start doing that again, because that is what S.W.O.R.D. does in the comics. It's basically a space shield. And Monica has basically been grounded because, you know, she's been missing for 5 years. She kind of got to catch up on things before she goes back into space and stuff, because that's a big thing to do. So she ends up going to New Jersey. She gets set off on this mission to work with the FBI and Jimmy Woo. And this cop here, he says, oh, Westview, I've never heard of that. Westview doesn't exist. And turns out that guy is from Eastview. And we've heard some different things about these two towns. And I'm wondering, like, what's the connection between these two towns here, Westview and Eastview? But then Monica gets out this sword helicopter, which we were theorizing was an actual real-life helicopter that got too close and then turned into a toy helicopter. But no, it was an actual drone, and then it just transformed a little bit once it got inside the sitcom reality. So that was really interesting there. And then also, alongside the drone getting sucked in, Monica also gets sucked in, and then obviously she becomes Geraldine and all that stuff. And then, after this, Darcy shows up. Darcy and a whole bunch of other scientists are being taken to this sword base that has now been set up outside of Westview. And this is really cool to see that Darcy is back. I love that character in the Thor movies. But before I get into talking about that, we do also get the explanation of the beekeeper, because there's this sword agent called Agent Franklin. He is wearing a sword hazmat suit, and then he climbs down a well, climbs through the sewer, and then we see eventually what happened when he comes up out of the sewer, because as soon as he passed that bridge, as soon as he broke through that wall, he automatically transformed into a beekeeper suit, because it's like this reality just automatically transforms everything to fit this decade and this sitcom. And this is another thing that we were theorizing about, and it ended up being true, so that's really cool. But back to Darcy, because Darcy is awesome. So she is the one that figures out that there is this TV show being broadcasted, and basically they watch WandaVision. They watch through the first 3 episodes, and they analyze it. They take notes, they ask questions and all that stuff. And I love how Jimmy Woo, when he was writing down questions and stuff, one of the first things he wrote was, like, what do all of these hexagons mean? Or, like, what's with the hexagonal patterns? And that was just hilarious to me, because for the first 3 episodes, there's been so many hexagons, and so many fans have been trying to figure out, like, what do these hexagons mean? And now, I think this is obvious that now it was kind of just put in there just to make us think it was something important, and it's really literally nothing, because Marvel, they know we go through this stuff and analyze this stuff so specifically, so they knew we would notice that. So I think clearly that it means nothing. It was kind of just to play with us, and good one, Marvel. So there's that was really funny. But they start actually identifying the different residents of Westview, and I did a breakdown of that yesterday when we got the trailer or the promo for episode 4. And we get some interesting stuff here. You would definitely want to check out that video, because I break down some of the stuff that it actually says on the IDs and the files for the different characters. So definitely check that out. But then, like I said, Darcy and Jimmy, they are basically watching WandaVision, and then they decide, let's try and send a message through this radio. And Jimmy does it. We see how he sends the message. He's like, Wanda, who is doing this to you? Wanda, are you all right? All that good stuff. But when Darcy is watching the episode, it cuts out that part. So they think it didn't work. But obviously we know that it did, because Wanda did see that. And then Dottie broke the glass and everything. So clearly there's some sort of censorship here. And then we see that again later in the episode when, again, they are watching WandaVision. And then someone is just censoring the broadcast, because that moment where Monica gets tossed out of the sitcom reality, we actually get to see the rest of that unfold, the rest of it play out there. And I love how Wanda actually fixes the walls, gotta hide the evidence and everything. So that was really cool. But then when Vision arrives at home, she sees dead Vision. So he's all gray, he's got the hole in his head and everything. And super creepy. And then he goes back to normal, and then they just sit down and everything's good. And then pretty much that's where it ends. That is where WandaVision episode 4 ends. And this was just a crazy episode. Like I said before, this explains so much. A lot of our theories have been right. And I'm excited to see what we have going on in episode 5, where now we have both perspectives going on here with both WandaVision and Sword. So guys, I am just really excited for the rest of WandaVision. And of course, stay tuned for my Who Dat Devil episode to find out who in this episode I think is secretly Mephisto in disguise. That will probably be coming out Sunday. But for now, guys, let me know down in the comments below all your thoughts on this episode of WandaVision, all your theories. and all that good stuff. So thanks so much for watching. Please drop a like if you enjoyed this video, and hit the subscribe button so I can keep up to date on everything that goes on in the Marvel life.